One of the more complex questions we have to answer is around the options of managing your flight department in-house or putting it in the hands of a third-party management company. Very, very complex and lots of energy, not only around first-time buyers, but established owners as well. There might be a change in their operational philosophy that drives this sort of conversation. So, Colby, lots of different ways to approach this, but what are some of the similarities?
Yeah, so both options are going to offer you typically very, very high levels of service and a good margin or standard of safety and flexibility in your operation. The caveat is there are lots of different varieties of management. It's not a one-size-fits-all, it's not a cookie-cutter approach. So being mindful of the individual structure that a given management company you're considering has and comparing that to your internal capabilities is important.
Oh yeah, and by the way, financially, it's not really a decision subject to charter revenue aside. There is no real cost benefit between managing it in-house versus having a third party look at it as well.
We typically see a cost variance of maybe 3 to 5% tops, very little.
Yeah, absolutely. So both of these options do have a lot of pros and cons, and when we think about the pros, there's certainly a lot of important considerations for in-house management.
Yeah. When you think about in-house management, really you're talking about complete and total control of the owner to do, really within the bounds of regulation, what they want to. There's no cost markups. Everything should be done on a completely pass-through cost basis, so there's no sort of funny business that ever happens and no sort of inflation there unnecessarily. You directly not only influence but choose the standard to which you want to operate. Our founder, Pete Ager, used to say that regulatory compliance prevents failure, it doesn't ensure success, and I think that is the definition of what you think about in managed versus an in-house operation. And you've got really greater privacy internally. You're not required to disclose passenger lists and destinations to a third party. So, some real keys to think about.
Yeah, and when you get into the managed operations, certainly they come to the table with purchasing power, volume power, and things like insurance and fuel, and even some of the maintenance requirements there. There's also their ability to handle a lot of the HR issues that might come up that you wouldn't have to handle internally. Managing the regulatory requirements is a very complex front as well, and not having that as a core competency for your company and putting this in the hands of a third party who lives and breathes this every day provides a lot of benefit overall. So a lot of different things to think about relative to the positives that each of these sides of the equation offer.
Yeah, the one other component that you didn't mention, Jeff, is charter revenue. So while there are lots of different structures that you may or may not want to consider, understanding the true cost benefit of any potential charter revenue and margin is important, but it's an option that you can consider with third-party management.
But not to be lost, there are certainly some downfalls for each side of these equations as well. It's important to understand where they do have their shortcomings. So on the in-house operations.
Yeah, certainly. When you think about an in-house operation, you really have more oversight on the management company required by the owner. Somebody, has to kind of watch the hen house, so to speak. Not something every organization wants to look at. The owner gets involved in owner issues within in-house operation. You become in the aviation business. Again, not something that we always sort of like to see for our customers. And we mentioned charter revenue. Obviously, that's not an opportunity within the bounds of the regulations in an in-house Part 91 operation.
Yeah, and on the other side, when we're talking about a vendor, you have to manage this vendor. It's important to understand the role that they're playing as a vendor and making sure that this is something that's managed to the expectations that you and your company deserves and requires. So this is not a hands-off operation.
The other idea that frequently comes up as a point of stress or concern when you're thinking in-house versus externally managed is the idea of transparency. Be that transparency with your internal employees and kind of what's really going on out at the airport, or transparency with your management company. We often see the terms and conditions of a relationship memorialized in a management agreement, but there are lots of things that don't get captured in that management agreement as just a course of habit. So making sure that the ins and outs, the day in, day out, is managed on a very transparent basis in either structure is really imperative.
Yeah, managing that transparency and the expectations is very, very important, whether you're doing it in-house or you're doing it with third party. Making sure those expectations are well communicated, received, and heard, critical to make sure that that relationship is successful, no doubt about it. The other thing to think about is relative to in-house versus third party is culturally, what does your organization typically do in the same arena that's not a core competency for their company? In the arenas of maybe IT services or security, are those outsourced as a common thread within your organization? Then if so, then maybe a third-party management company follows that same philosophy.